from the backgrounds of everyone that none of you know it very well. Knew it. I can pick people from across the room. It's really easy after a while. I am a postdoctoral fellow at Northeastern. I work in a combination of science, methodology, and physiology sorts of topics. I work in computational science laboratory. I have had a podcast for 2.5 years with a co-host who you'll probably hear more about later. There's a gentleman that I did my PhD with who is a Colombian man now working in Norway. I am, of course, an Australian man now working in Boston, which helps keep things reasonably international from time to time. Everything Hurts has been going for 70 episodes. We have somewhere between 80 and 85 hours of recorded material so far. The focus of it has changed over time until it ended up at the nexus of what it is now, which is kind of an early career podcast, in the sense that we are both early career academics. The audience is more or less entirely other early career academics, and the topics and the people who are involved with the production of the material are all concerned with early career issues for the most part. Which brings us to today. I know Joe because we have a lot of mutual people that we know in the open science community, and he listens to my podcast. And so do, I'm assured that some of the other people here do, but I don't know who they are, so I can't meet them. This is when you have a conference that's in your town, and I work right by where you work. It's just down the road on Huntington Avenue. Sometimes you can be a little bit disconnected from these things, so you sort of turn up for a session, and I came yesterday for a panel, and then I had to go back to work, so I'm not 100% aware of everything that's been going on so far. It's interesting trying to find out its speed. So, hello. Actually, let's find out how you two dudes are doing. What's your name?
My name's Christian.
How you doing, Christian?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Hey, not too bad. Where are you? What's your story? Where are you from?
I'm from New Jersey, Princeton area.
Right on. Interest in early career podcasting?
Just curious about the space. I work in software development in like education technology.
Right on.
And so we kind of focus on academic audio and like organizing professor lectures, thoughts, ideas, that sort of thing. So just like learning about the space.
Cool. Makes sense. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
What's your story?
Yeah, it's nice. I'm an early career academic. I'm writing my dissertation right now.
Oh, good. Fun times.
I know, it's very exciting.
Yeah, you'll look back on these fond moments years from now and wonder what the hell was going on.
No, exactly. But I actually started kind of a podcast for academic therapy earlier with some other graduate students called This After Life.
Nice.
And yeah, it was a fun, it was nice. As an academic, you spend so much time writing and just kind of solitary. It's great to have conversations and put them out there. Another kind of format production. So
Right on.
that's why I'm very interested to hear about
That is essentially the bulk of what I prepared.
Yeah.
Because let me put all of this into perspective. We are not podcasters in a professional sense, myself and Dan. We have some experience, went to the kind of university where they give you media training and occasionally hit you around the head and neck with TV and newspaper stuff. We've both done research that is like that, without having any kind of interest into going into it as a professional endeavor. We are very, very heavily committed and delighted to be, in one very serious sense, as amateurish as possible. And we have a tagline that works for that over the top of the whole show. But generally we don't tell people. This is a sotto voce tagline. It's not part of the show. But it's, do it seriously, don't take it seriously. It's kind of a commitment to amateurism. Hopefully not from the content perspective. I'll qualify what I mean. There are people at this conference. I was just putting my heads into some of the other sessions there. There was an excellent session on audio editing. What do you do with this particular raw file? What does your processing pipeline work? We sorted that out before our first episode and then have never changed it since or paid the slightest bit of attention to it. We have no interest in it whatsoever. There's people in this room or at this conference who would be horrified by my microphone technique. They would be horrified by the language that our guests use and how intensely Australian some things can come across. Right? We don't take any particularly negative feedback seriously. We love bad reviews because we read them out on the show. They're sometimes the funniest part of it. You know what they say, you're supposed to ignore the haters? I can get 10 minutes of good content out of a hater. Roll the haters in, right? There's absolutely no point being sensitive about stuff like that. It's not for us. So that's not taking it seriously. Doing it seriously is different. We have been going for 2.5 years, and we have an episode schedule with which we have missed one episode. And we're both early career academics. In that point in time, Dan had moved countries, had a child, and then got promoted within the course of the episode schedule. I have emigrated, gone to Poland, come back to Boston, gotten a job in Boston, and gotten married. This is keeping early career academic hours, which are, let's put it nicely and say, unforgiving. We missed one episode in 2.5 years. Actually, we missed 1.5 episodes in 2.5 years because halfway through one episode, Dan's wife went into labor and he had to leave. And I finished the episode by myself. We rolled that in too. It was awesome. That makes the most unbelievably good marketing material. So the point in time where it actually happens. I have never missed a single tweet, email, message, leg. What's it called when they try to scroll to the leg of the pigeon? I've got all them as well. Every piece of communication that's ever come in for the period of 30 months, I have either seen, and if there's any content with it whatsoever, I have responded to. That's doing it seriously. Taking it seriously is something else entirely. I take it you're all at least reasonably familiar with the general Podscape. There are so many podcasts with somewhere between 6 to 20 episodes where people just stopped. We started in the first instance with a plan to get to 20 episodes and a plan to get to 100 episodes from the beginning. Now, do the wheels occasionally fall off the wagon horribly? Yes. Does that bother us? Not particularly. And that is a distinction that we've managed to stick to through the entire life of the show, which is doing reasonably well now. We do not have a large audience. We have somewhere between, per episode, 4,000 to 10,000 listens. I would estimate about 20% of our listeners have listened to all 80 hours of the content that exists. We have a very, very loyal group of people who listen to what we do. And we know exactly who they are. There's no one younger than 21 because most of the people who are interested in the first instance are graduate students. There's almost no one over the age of 40 because most people stop being early career researchers or leave academia at that point. We know the countries that they're from, and it's most of them. This is not a United States podcast, it's a global podcast. We have lots of listeners from the Netherlands and lots of listeners from the UK in particular because we cover a lot of meta-science and science process stuff, and those topics are well known there. We have everywhere else in the Anglosphere is reasonably well represented. The gender balance is perfectly even because people are only driven into the kind of the pipeline to stay as listeners from social, medical, the biological sciences, full stop. Almost no one who's not a scientist, almost no one who's in the hard sciences is a listener. So we know literally exactly who we're dealing with as a demographic, and they stay. Yeah?
How do you get all this data?
A combination of aggregating it off the platforms that Dan uses. Sometimes we have tracked links that have gone out with show stuff that's been released. Occasionally we've polled stuff reasonably casually, and of course I've talked to a tremendous amount of people. I've been to conferences where academic conferences where there have been like somewhere between 10 and 30 people who I've never met who know me because they listen to the podcast. which is always an incredibly unusual experience, but I know who they are and where they're from and what they do. If you're interested in doing something like this is one of the nice parts about the strong commitment to amateurism. You are going to do something. I mean, I have a whole episode on power analysis, the mathematical technique to make sure that scientific observations are appropriate and worthwhile. Everyone is in public health school, I wouldn't define it like that. Yes, I know. But it is very difficult to make a general interest episode on power analysis. And that is one of the reasons that everything is brutally, persistently casual. The conversational aspect that you have of that, we've tried doing more structured episodes. And I like to think of that as something like a seesaw. The more difficult it gets, the more technically difficult it gets, the more casually it has to be treated, the more direct the language has to be, the more straightforward the presentation has to be.
Actually, on this topic, because this is something I've been thinking about a lot, and for most of the public health people, and particularly, like, we're talking about these methods, and even something like power analysis.
Pretty simple, right?
Well, I think if you've trained in it and you understand the math behind it, it seems like it would be really good. But on the other hand, I think I'm a very visual person, so like being able to see the equations, being able to see sort of how it works was a way for me to learn at least better.
Yep.
And so it's really fascinating for me to hear that you're discussing stuff like this through like an audio type medium. Yeah, so I'm just curious, could you talk about that a little bit more? Like, how do you...
The reason that shakes out, obviously we're not explaining it from scratch, and if I had to explain this to students the other day, I did it using mathematical simulations of here is the sample, here is everything else, and then drawing graphs. That's explaining it. But an awful lot of the time in any early career focused thing, you will be talking about scientific culture. So there's probably on that episode, I can't remember, it was a while ago, but there's probably conversations about what happened when I was writing a paper and sending it to a journal, and the author didn't know what power analysis was and wrote back and got cranky with me.
Okay. So it's like the audience basically is like sort of with it, or
Yes.
at least can follow, doesn't need that
Yep.
level of explanation, you can just jump right in.
Yep.
Okay.
For a niche podcast, assumed knowledge has a tremendous amount of power. I listened to, I was on a panel yesterday with Tara Boyle, who's one of the producers of Hidden Brain. Listen to their episodes for how they set up concepts and how careful they have to be with putting words and concepts in order for people who don't understand them from scratch. It's very, very well done. And I do the exact opposite on purpose. We start off, hello, this is my name. Hello, this is my name. Technical question. That's literally the introduction. When you have a niche audience, you are allowed to have a strong body of assumed knowledge. And if they're scientists, they're also used to catching up on the fly. You have an enormous amount of space with which to actually work with when you do that. And I've had people who listen to more general science podcasts who say that is, it's almost aggressive, the approach with the way that you start getting into material. Yeah, it is, and it's absolutely deliberate. It works extremely well. It sounds kind of crazy, but that is the point to which it's actually evolved. It's the nice thing about keeping listeners as well.
Yeah, I was going to kind of say, like, I feel like one of the core problems that I've seen with podcasts is that they speak to the broad audience, and so somebody who wants like a technical understanding of something is kind of left like to their own resources to figure out more. But like offering a solution where you speak to those like direct audiences who want like that more technical expertise are able to kind of get that from.
Yeah, and it's also the freedom that you have when you're committed to the idea that you're going to do a small podcast, right? I have absolutely no pretensions whatsoever about trying to push it bigger. I know how that would work. I know who to talk to. I know the budget that we'd need. I know the equipment that we'd need. I know the kind of thing that I'd even want to produce. I'm not going to do it because it's not my job. This is like punk rock, right? All of the music that started, when punk started, it wasn't anyone's job. It was something that people did in their spare time, and something that punks used to say is, "I'd rather have a day job." Right? I'd rather have a day job. As in, they say, I'd rather work at Kroger or Sears or Home Depot and make the music that I want to make, which is now all considered to be kind of in the pantheon of people who listen to music like that, to be the modern classics, was made by a guy in his garage. was the original liner notes were cut out with safety scissors, and the albums were literally assembled by hand. And now those things are regarded as having not any kind of decent recording fidelity, but as being important and central to the entire musical experience, especially like Washington and the West Coast. Right? That became a genre before anyone knew what it was going to be, and it was all done on like guys who were living on dog food sandwiches and Mars bars, right? And it had to go out and acquire its own classicism. I like for the academic space, there's a point past which you can't push into your more general approach to things. I absolutely love doing this, in particular with open science topics where people care a lot. They're extremely well read, they understand the concepts, and what they want to do more than anything else is meet the people who are within their actual area. They want to have something Joe introduced me to a while ago, a parasocial relationship of a podcast, which is where people who are listening to it feel like they know you. You don't know them, you might not even know they're out there listening, but they feel like they know you. The other lovely thing that you can do when you can realistically expect you might have somewhere between 5 and 20 conversations after an episode with different people across different platforms. That's good, right? That parasocial relationship is a good start. My favorite thing to do, and everything that comes from the back end of the show, is wreck that completely. And by wreck that, I mean I'm writing back to these people. We're tweeting their stuff. We're talking on Facebook. I'm meeting them at conferences. I want to meet as many of those people as possible. I do not want to have a parasocial relationship. I want to have a normal social network of people. So we started instituting rules. People are very proud when they manage to make it through our entire back catalogue, because obviously some of the early stuff is quite bad. Some of it's more specific than it otherwise might have to be when you're looking around for topics as you try to get started. The people who actually listen to all of it are required to, it's one of the rules, they have to come up with an episode topic. We're going to do half an hour on the topic that they choose, because who's going to have better context than them? They've listened to all of it more recently than we have. So the next topic is theirs, and if they don't want to pick one, I will go out into the world, I will email them and say, where's my topic for our podcast? I want that now. You're going to have to get back to me with that. And then follow it up a week later, which is much easier now that Google has their inbuilt nudge system. People, when it comes to an ecosystem like this, you can personally maintain a very healthy one. It doesn't have to be a big one. This will not scale. But there are not a lot of early career people, or even people who aren't, who can care about the center of those issues. And it allows you to be kind of, I don't know if aggressive is the right word, it allows you to be proactive with the people who are listening to it. There are some very good other podcasts that are within the same space. And when they started, which was after us for the most part, when they started, a few people would write to me with that kind of, do you know they're coming into your house and eating all the bread? Did you know people are doing that? I said, yes, it's fantastic. There should be more of that. There should be a whole ecosystem. Do you think people are going to run out of time? We record 65 minutes of material every 2 weeks, right? Do you know how long people ride the train for? Do you know how long people do the washing up for? Do you know how long people walk their dogs for? People have more space. People have more space than that. And also, until there's more than one, it's not actually a thing. It doesn't become a category until there's multiples. If I was starting another podcast from scratch, I would do what the people who followed our original idea for a podcast, because there's now probably 3, 4, 5 sort of like people within a circle of I know all these people. I've met them professionally. I know the scientific work that they do. I've met them at conferences. We have a long list of mutual acquaintances. I'm very glad they started podcasts after ours. Now it's acquired its own, but whatever this is has acquired its own identity. If I was starting one from scratch now, or I had a new one, I would be looking for a category that someone else had started that was working to fill in. That is not taking their airtime and space. There's more earballs than we let on. I love that phrase. Whereas everyone on the internet's always competing for eyeballs, these are earballs. I know it doesn't have to make sense. But if any of you, a couple of you are in that situation, I'd seriously consider that. Find something that's reasonably unusual, that's within the niche of what you want to inhabit, and you're allowed to do that too. It will change. It will change after the first sort of 3, 4, 5 episodes. The whole thing will shift and lurch. You'll find you'll get to the end of an episode and you hate it, you don't like it. Don't throw it out, leave it there, see what happens. Change it, roll it over, keep going. Just have sort of short, medium, and long-term plans, and then stop. This is the lovely thing about podcasting. I absolutely love podcasting. As someone who is an academic all day, the idea of giving myself permission to do something. I give myself permission to do an episode on that. I was talking with Lisa yesterday, who was just in this room before I left. She said, you should do an episode on this. I talked to Dan this morning, he was like, right, we're doing it. You have the freedom to move if you have it.